So in the brand new update, Tycoon has just added in the Project 1124, and this vehicle is surprisingly actually very powerful, and it might even be a counter to a lot of air vehicles, but also the Zumwalt. It's gonna be having a speed of 45 and a health of 2,800, but when you max it out, it's gonna be going 58 knots, and it's going to be having 3,640 health, which from what it seems to me is actually semi above average. It's just going to be having the stats of the PR206 while having way more powerful stats than something like the PGO2, the Thermal, and the Barracuda. So firstly, taking a look at the cannon, and this actually comes as a pretty big surprise to me, but this cannon is going to be having very good fire rate, and it will on average actually be able to two-shot an F-35, and the exact same thing can also be done to the V-22 Osprey. So in a sense, this vehicle might even be a counter to it if you're being camped by the Osprey. Consider the fact that this vehicle only takes 2 parts to spawn, so for this firepower, that's pretty good. Now against the Super Hind, it's also going to be able to two-shot it, however it will get it to very low after even one shot, which means on average it might even end up one-shotting a lot of helicopters in this game, which makes this vehicle really good. Now in terms of this cannon's damage against ground vehicles and primarily the Lavad which we're testing against, let's just say it does over 100 damage. It's not very good, it's not gonna be amazing at countering the ground, so really this cannon will mainly be used against air, which honestly I don't mind that since ground vehicles are not very prominent in this meta. However, the cannon will be able to do some really good damage to the Abrams X, and on average you're probably gonna be 5-shotting it most of the time, which I think is pretty good. Now lastly, taking a look at its damage against ships, on average you're gonna be doing around 3 to 4% per hit, which is definitely really good considering the fire rate, and this vehicle does also have a very good clip size. So after pretty much all of the cannon being shot, you will be able to leave the Zumwalt around 30 to 40% on average, which in my opinion is extremely good considering the fact that you can also combine your gun with the AA turret, and you'll be seeing that in just a second. Now this anti-air turret might have the best fire rate out of any ground vehicle in the game, because this thing will literally be able to shred an F-35 in just 1 second if you put all the bullets into it. Holy moly with that, and the same results will also be replicated against the Super Hind. So the air players have to be insanely careful if they actually want to attack boats now, which I think is great because the boats are stuck in the water, and I think it makes most sense for them to have very high firepower. Now the damage against vehicles will also be very good because the ground vehicles will be suffering if you manage to actually hit them with all of the bullets. However, the damage against tanks is not primarily going to be insane. You're only going to be doing 13 per shot, and you guys can see these results against the Abrams X. The tank is not really taking too much damage, but why would you even use some AA turrets to mainly target tanks? It doesn't really make that much sense. You're always going to be using the cannon for that, and you can really just use these turrets for combining DPS more than anything. Now, in terms of the artillery damage, it will be pretty decent against helicopters and planes. On average, it will be two-shotting an F-35 and the Mi-24 Super Hind. However, I am slightly disappointed with the damage against ground vehicles. As you guys can see, it takes at least 10 of these rockets to be able to kill a ground vehicle, and the same results can also be replicated against tanks. So these artillery rockets will really just be a bonus for this vehicle, and it's just going to be supporting it in terms of being able to engage ground targets once the cannon isn't able to engage them. I feel like these are just the copied stats from the Katyusha more than anything else, but honestly I don't mind this since this might just end up being very good against infantry, because as you guys can see in the current test, my friend is going to be standing on the other side of the gate which I'm shooting at, and then he's slowly going to be making his way closer and closer, and as you guys can see, we were able to hit a nice sweet spot. So I have to say, if you do aim these rockets correctly and you know roughly how to use them, that I think this is just going to be pretty good. However, what these rockets are actually insanely good at is going to be the boat combat, because pretty much all the 16 of them will be able to destroy the Zumwalt's health quite heavily and get it down to around 50% or so, which I think is pretty good. However, the biggest gem of this vehicle is if you manage to actually combine the DPS of the main cannon and the AA turrets against the Zumwalt. After a full burst, once you run out of ammo, you will be able to actually destroy the Zumwalt, and that to me is insane, because if you manage to catch this thing off guard, well, the Zumwalt is pretty much dead. You can say bye-bye to your pay-to-win tool, not gonna lie. But yeah, I think this vehicle does have some really good potential in this meta for being a great air counter while also being decent against the Zumwalt. So honestly, I do suggest you guys to be grinding this operation. This vehicle is definitely worth it, and I'm very surprised on how good they actually made it for just more like a starter boat. But to be honest, it seems like they just want the boats to be really good in this meta, which I think is great considering the fact that the air has been dominating it quite a lot. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and make sure to subscribe to Meowser for actually helping me out with this damage test.